Enroll now at Australia's Sydney Met and win a scholarship of up to $15,000. Apply today.
Tonight on First at 9 this Sunday, the 7th of April 2024. The path of stability. Let's protect the path of stability, urges President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Highlights plans to come out of bankruptcy by June. Load off the back. Sri Lanka likely to receive a 15-year debt repayment period with a reduced interest rate. The toxic truth. CEA appoints an internal committee to probe the toxic waste cargo planned to be carried to Sri Lanka via the vessel which destroyed the Baltimore Bridge.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Ada Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Ada Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now in your top story tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe called on the legal fraternity to come forward and strengthen the country's democracy made vulnerable during the people's struggle of 2022. Speaking at a meeting in Anuradhapura, President Wickremesinghe questioned why the Bar Association failed to condemn the brutal murder of late parliamentarian of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Amarakirti Athukorala, during the violent riots on the 9th of May. Further, the President emphasized the need of thinking anew moving forward, adding that the traditional patterns of thinking too contributed to the downfall of the country's economy.
During his visit to Anuradhapura, President Ranil Wickremesinghe met the lawyers of the district yesterday and called on them to unite in upholding law and order while propelling the nation towards progress.
I did not come here as the leader of the United National Party. If I am the president, I have to work independent of my party affiliations. Our traditional way of thinking is now over. We fell into this situation because we engaged in traditional mainstream politics. No one came forward to take responsibility or form a government. One of our parliamentarians, who was hiding himself in a clothing store after running away to save his life, was beaten to death. Some people considered the violent murder to be acceptable. Did the Bar Association at least condemn that act? As lawyers, we have to ask ourselves those hard questions. That parliamentarian was democratically elected to the parliament. He was not from my party. He was an innocent parliamentarian. I have spoken to him only once when he came to talk to me. That was the low standard to which we fell. We have forgotten that. The member who commands the majority in parliament has to take up the office of the Prime Minister. When that person loses the majority, someone else has to claim that position. If the house of the incumbent Prime Minister is torched and the opposition urges him to step down, then where is democracy? What we have to do now is strengthen democracy. On principle, if someone is pushed into trouble, we must learn to condemn such actions despite what their party affiliation is. Some parties say that they will punish those who are engaging in theft. How are they going to punish them? Will that particular party's disciplinary committee punish them? We are against theft. If someone is found guilty of such a crime, the judiciary will punish them. We have no jurisdiction to do so. If they say they will produce those who are engaging in theft before the court, that is fine.
New Dulux Pentolite Hygiene Plus. Refreshing walls for generations. Dulux.
Now, meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, during a meeting with political party representatives in Kandy, highlighted the need of protecting the path of stability the country achieved after a hard-fought battle. Speaking further, the President is of the view that an advisory board should be formed comprising former LG chairmen to coordinate government programs within the rural communities.
A meeting with political party representatives convened at the President's house in Kandy under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Due to our efforts since 2022, we have been able to restore the country's economic situation back to normal. That is stability. We are taking steps to come out of bankruptcy by June. We have to protect the path we took. If we do not do it, our creditor nations, global financial institutions that provided loans will demand that we repay our dues. I'm planning to extend the debt repayment period until 2042 under new conditions.
We have not been able to maintain close contact with our villagers. Neither do we have any coordination with the villagers, nor do we have any way of re-establishing links.
I understand that all of you have responsibilities to fulfill. Let's look at the possibility of establishing an advisory body for each area.
The United National Party, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and the All Ceylon Makkal Congress represent this institution. All of us propose that you contest in the upcoming presidential election. As local government representatives, we are ready to support you.
Sri Lanka is likely to receive a 15-year debt repayment period starting from 2028 with the interest rates newly set at around 2%. During an interview with Nikkei, President's National Security Advisor and Chief of Presidential Staff Sagala Ratnayaka said that there will be no further debt reductions despite requests by the Sri Lankan government. Speaking further, Ratnayaka said that Sri Lanka is open to investment and does not pick and choose on the basis of what country unless it affects national security. During a recent interview with Nikkei, President's National Security Advisor and Chief of Presidential Staff Sagala Ratnayaka mentioned that negotiations with the creditor nations have concluded and that the government is hoping that a detailed announcement will take place in the next few weeks. According to Nikkei, the repayment period will be 15 years from 2028 to 2042 with the interest rate newly set at around 2%. Ratnayaka added that there will be no further debt reduction despite a request made by the island nation. Further, Sagala Ratnayaka said that loans from China, Sri Lanka's biggest creditor too, will be restructured in a manner similar to that of the Official Creditor Committee and Paris Club, adding that Sri Lanka will treat all its creditors equally, implying that the terms of debt repayment to China will be similar to those agreed at the creditors' meeting. While highlighting that the agreement struck with China on the Hambantota port is purely commercial, Ratnayaka is of the view that there is nothing military about it. He said that Sri Lanka is open to investment and does not pick and choose on the basis of what country unless it affects national security. Drawing attention to the rising tensions between the two regional superpowers, Ratnayaka added that Sri Lanka is conscious of anything that has an impact on the national security of India. Now bringing to you more on the economic front, the World Bank chief economist for the South Asian region, Francisca Onsog, says countries in the South Asian region that aim to achieve the status of developed nations will not be able to achieve it at the 6% regional growth currently predicted by the World Bank. Joining our current affairs program at Hyde Park with Indivari Amuatta, Onsog, citing data recently published in the South Asian Development Update, highlighted the lack of private investment in the region, which is a key factor that accelerates regional growth. During the discussion, the chief economist for the region said that countries which aim to achieve developed nation status must have a higher growth rate and that the region must show an overall growth rate of a minimum of 8%.
We're talking about inflation. The report says inflation is likely to rise moderately in the near term due to new revenue measures.
It's around the world that inflation is coming down. So this is really something that is then spilling over elsewhere as well. Now, is it coming down fast enough in enough countries? That's a question mark. So in some of the advanced countries, inflation is still running well above target. So these central banks will have to be careful when they start reducing the policy rates. Because what has happened over the last 2 years, pretty much, since March 2022, is a monetary policy tightening in G7 countries that is unprecedented in decades. You have to go back to the 1970s to see this kind of increase in policy rates in the major central banks. So this is one of the reasons why now 1/4 of the emerging markets and developing economies are in financial stress. Everyone with high debt is struggling to pay that debt with global interest rates being so high. Poor are coming under pressure, yes, because of growth, but they're also on inflation, of course. But they're also coming under pressure because of climate change. But when we do a thorough review of every study we could find from any country in the world, the poor are the ones who suffer most when there is a climate shock. The ones who are really struggling with adapting to climate change is farmers and households. Farmers and households can only offset, on average, across all these countries that we found, somewhere between 1/3 and half of the damage from climate shocks. And one of the reasons is that they just don't have that kind of access to effective technologies. The standard strategy for a household or a farm to adapt to climate damage is labor market, is moving. It's either literally migrating or is taking on a different job in non-agriculture. Because they are so bad at adapting to climate change, it's actually government goods and services, public goods and services that are the most effective form of climate adaptation for households. Firms, for them, it's more about technologies, and then we're talking about access to finance. We're talking about private investment to access these technologies, to implement new technologies, to invest in new technologies. And there the region really lags. Private investment is really languishing in the region. It's much lower than elsewhere. These private investment accelerations are periods of good times. So for 8 years on average, private investment just accelerates, and with it comes output growth, poverty reduction, all sorts of good things happen. So these are good times. So we've tried to estimate what increases the probability that such an acceleration starts. Turns out there's 3 things. One is trade and capital account openness. One is good institutions, improvements in institutions. And the third one is a well-aligned exchange rate. We expect the region to actually do quite well at current trends for now. The question is it doing well enough? So a regional growth of 6% is perfectly respectable, but it's not enough to meet the targets. Most countries in this region have the goal of becoming high income at some point in this generation. Different years, but some point in this generation. And it's just not going to happen with 6% growth. It's going to happen with 8% growth around the region. A lot of countries just need higher growth rates to achieve their long-term development goals.
Now, the Central Environmental Authority Chairman, Venera Fernandez, says that the authority has appointed an internal committee to probe the attempted import of toxic waste to Sri Lanka through the Singapore-flagged cargo vessel Dali, which recently destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore in the United States in an apparent accident. According to Fernando, if any hazardous material is being transported or imported into Sri Lanka, prior approval must be sought from the Central Environmental Authority. However, according to the CEA chairman, no such requests for approval were sought by the agents of the ocean-going vessel so far. The Singapore-flagged cargo vessel Dali, bound for Sri Lanka, lost power and crashed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge at about 1:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 26th of March, causing a section of the bridge to collapse into the Patapsco River. The container vessel has been confirmed to be owned by Grace Ocean Singapore and operated by the Synergy Group Ship Management Company. The 948-feet-long container ship with 4,700 containers was scheduled to arrive at the Colombo port on the 22nd of April. 6 construction workers died due to the accident, while 3 of the bodies of those deceased were recovered by last Friday. According to media reports, out of the total containers on the ship, 56 contained corrosive, flammable and various hazardous material and explosives, as well as Class 9 hazardous material including lithium batteries. Even though there are no official reports regarding how many containers were to be unloaded in Sri Lanka, Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripala de Silva said that out of 56 containers that were said to contain hazardous material, 1 was scheduled to be offloaded in Sri Lanka.
The Baltimore ship sparked controversy here in Sri Lanka. Subsequently, it was reported that the ship was transporting a large amount of toxic waste to Sri Lanka. That is not true. Out of all the containers on the ship, only 56 of them contain hazardous material. However, only one of those 56 containers was expected to be offloaded in Sri Lanka. It could contain either nitric acid or some sort of paint. The general public does not need to panic. No one is coming to blow up the Colombo port.
Meanwhile, the Central Environmental Authority's chairman, Venera Fernando, claims that prior permission must be secured from the CEA if any entity intends to import hazardous material to the country. However, the CEA chairman went on to say that the required approval has not been sought in this instance.
Central Environment Authority is there to basically protect the environment and protect the country. So in this specific case, basically that we need to be careful on the hazardous material and the hazardous waste. So hazardous waste that we have a called Basel Convention. According to the Basel Convention, that we don't allow any A type. There are two categories, that A type and the B type. So the A category waste that we don't allow in any form to come into the country. But certain waste categories falling into the B, which is taking for some other manufacturing process. For that also that they need to get a prior approval before loading to their ship, which we evaluate through a special committee called Basel Technical Committee. So then we will approve the shipper, loader or the owner to bring that material into the country. But in specific on this case that we haven't got informed any source or anything like that, any shipment coming into the country. So therefore that we don't know yet whether there are some transshipments coming in this particular ship. Only thing is that for that particular reason we have appointed a committee, internal committee chaired by our Director General and some of the Deputy Director General. So they are working with the other organization or other companies or the other government institutions to get this particular information. And once we have that information, only that we can tell that is any their type of waste is coming for the transshipment. But the normal practice is, if there's any transshipment, that transshipments also has to inform us prior to the loading. But in this such case, so we haven't received any information such.
According to officials, there has been no official statement from the ship's agent in Sri Lanka regarding the container so far. Meanwhile, international media reports said that federal officials are poised to release preliminary findings of their investigation regarding the accident. Authorities trying to bring the Port of Baltimore back to a fully operational state have opened 2 temporary channels around the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, but are still unable to support commercial traffic as these alternate channels are not deep enough to accommodate the ocean-going container vessels. The salvage operations are ongoing, and media reports quoting officials said that the channel is expected to be fully operational by the end of May. Now in your political news, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa says a presidential candidate will be nominated by the SLPP following a meeting with the members of the party. Speaking to media in Anuradhapura, the former president also shared his thoughts on some of the latest political developments in the country.
Today, the former president Mahinda Rajapaksa visited the Ruwanweli Mahasaya and the Jayashri Mahabodhiya in Anuradhapura.
මට තාම බැසිල් මහත්තයා හම්බුනේ නැහැ අහන්න. ඔබතුමාගේ මව්පක්ෂය වෙන ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය දැන් අද්භූත රාශියකට පැමිණලා ඉන්නවා. ඔබතුමා හිටපු මව්පක්ෂයක් විදිහට කොයි ආකාරයෙන් දකින්නේ? ඉක්මනින් විශ්වාස ගන්නයි කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරනවා. සමගි ජනවාදී සම්දානගත වුණා මේක ඔබතුමාලට මොනවා ගැඹුරක් වෙයිද? මොනවා වුණත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ අපිට. සම්දාන 10ක් ගෙවුවත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. හොඳයි හැමදාම ගිහින් ඉන්නේ අපේ කට්ටිය. රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්මයා කියලා දෙනවා ඔහු ජනාධිපතිතුමාට ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. ඔබතුමාලගේ පක්ෂෙන් කවුරුහරි ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා කියන්නේ. අනිවාර්යනේ අපි ඉදිරිපත් කරයි කෙනෙක්. අපි තාම කැඳෙන්නේ අපි ක්‍රියාකාරීන් කෙල්වලා ඊයන් තීන්දුවක් ගන්නවා. නාම රාජපක්ෂ මහත්මයා ගැන කතා බහට ලක් වෙනවා. හිතනවා තාපල් තියෙනවා කියලා.
Now, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says that following elections, the Samagi Janabala Vegiya will take necessary action to empower 1 million micro, small and medium-scale entrepreneurs in the country. Premadasa made this claim while addressing the latest iteration of the SJB's Jana Power program in Kurunegala, where he also promised to introduce a program which will aid poor families to overcome their financial woes.
අපි අදහස් කරනවා අලුත් ශුද්‍ර කුඩා මධ්‍ය පරිමාණයේ ව්‍යාපාර ව්‍යවසායකින්
We intend to create 1 million micro, small and medium-scale entrepreneurs. We will also introduce a program stronger than Janasavya within a few months and will create the environment for poor families to overcome poverty by saving, producing and consuming, creating a better future. With the turning point that comes by the end of the year, we will create the era of the public that increases life expectancy, prosperity, development and reaps the benefits of economic growth.
සැමට ආර්ථික වර්ධනයේ ප්‍රතිලාභ ලැබෙන පොදු ජන යුගය අපි බිහි කරනවා කියන එක මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා.
Now taking you to the latest on the SLFP's internal crisis, a meeting chaired by advisor of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, former President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, will be held in Colombo tomorrow in order to address the ongoing crisis in the party. However, Acting General Secretary of the SLFP, Dushmantha Mitrapala, stated in a letter to the organizer of the meeting, Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva, that it is indeed illegal to hold a party meeting at this moment. Meanwhile, former President Maitripala Sirisena says he is ready to face any challenge and added that his party possesses a track record of never giving up. To address the ongoing political crisis in the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, a meeting has been called by the party's senior vice chairman, Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva, at the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute. The meeting will be held under the patronage of the party's advisor, former President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga. However, former President Maitripala Sirisena, former General Secretary Dayasiri Jayasekara and Shan Vijayalal de Silva have not been invited to the meeting. Against this backdrop, Acting General Secretary of the SLFP, Dushmantha Mitrapala, stated in a letter to Nimal Siripala de Silva that it is illegal to hold a party meeting at this moment. Addressing an event in Kaduwela, former President Maitripala Sirisena said that he is ready to face any crisis ahead.
Sri Lanka Nidahas Pakshaya mulu itihasaya purama.
Sri Lanka Freedom Party was persistent throughout history and had a track record of never giving up. Despite the torture inflicted on us and despite what anyone may say, we will never fall back. Instead, we will move forward.
On the 1st of May, we will reveal what we are going to do if a presidential election is called. There's a high chance that a candidate from our party will contest in such an election.
I haven't taken a decision on which party I will represent. However, I have received an invitation from Sri Lanka Freedom Party strongholds and members of the public to contest in the presidential election. The problem lies in taking this country down the correct path. Proper leadership is needed for such action. I'm ready to provide my support on behalf of the country when in need.
Now in other political news, leader of the National People's Power, Anrukumara Dissanayake, claims that Sri Lanka's Colombo-centric economy must be pushed outwards to include the rural areas of the country. He shared that thought in Mathura while drawing attention to the exponential rise in Sri Lanka's poverty statistics over the past few years.
PP conference was held under the patronage of its leader Anurukumara Dissanayake in the Mathura district today.
Increments to allowances are mostly spoken about during the election season. Take a look at Ranil Wickremesinghe's budget speech. The Aswasuma benefit will be passed down to 2 million families. State sector salaries will be increased by 10,000 rupees for a total of 1.4 million state workers. The rent charge for housing will also be removed. That is how they collect the country's votes. Since the 70s, all political slogans were on eradicating poverty. But really what has happened is that poverty has increased. According to 2019 statistics, 3 million people were in poverty. Today, that number has increased to 7 million. The National People's Power considers this situation to be a social tragedy. Sri Lanka is the country that cares the least about poverty in the region. The National People's Power has taken a principled decision to protect those excluded from the national economy. We will also take steps to assimilate them back into the country's economy. We need a strong program to bring people out of poverty. Direct subsidies will be the initial step in the process. The second step of the process is to expand the local economy. We need to expand the Colombo-centric economy to include rural economies. We are ready to form a new tax policy considering rural poverty. We are discussing about a new development bank. If someone is investing in the Uva province, the interest rate should be lowered. We need to push the economy into the rural areas of the country to eradicate poverty. We need to push our Colombo-centric economy towards the rural villages of the country.
Welcome back. Now, unfortunately, gun violence is the highlight of the News in Brief segment today, with 2 separate shootings resulting in a total of 3 deaths across various parts of the country. One individual attempting to assault police officers was shot in Mavanalla, while in Horner, 2 unsuspecting victims were gunned down by 2 assailants arriving in a motor vehicle. With that, let's take a look at some News in Brief today.
A 53-year-old man was shot dead last night after police opened fire while attempting to resolve a dispute in the Padiyadora area in Mavanalla. Police received a call from the residents of a nearby house complaining of a father and son duo who were pelting the property with stones. Upon arrival, the police officers found themselves under attack from the two assailants, prompting them to open fire in self-defense. The older of the two assailants was wounded by a gunshot while the younger had fled the scene. The wounded was rushed to the Mavanalla base hospital where he was later pronounced dead. Both individuals reportedly had criminal records after being apprehended for various charges including the possession of narcotics and illegal weapons. The two police officers wounded during the altercation were admitted to the same hospital where they are receiving further treatment. In other local news, a motorcycle collided with a lorry in the Jaliyagoda area in Piliyandala, killing the woman and injuring the man travelling on the motorcycle. Reportedly, the deceased was a nurse at the Kalubovila Teaching Hospital while the injured was her husband.
Now in your business news, continuing a 3-week trend, Sri Lanka's tea price averages fell across elevations at the first auction in April. Ceylon tea brokers showed industry data that the national weekly sale average fell by 45 rupees and 38 cents to 1,234 rupees and 59 cents a kilogram this week, which was previously stated at 1,279 rupees and 97 cents. Average tea prices, which moved up in US dollar terms up to 4.47 a kilo in the second week of February and has since fallen to 4.23 to the US dollar by the last week of March. The weekly average of Sri Lanka's highest priced teas, the low-grown variety, fell 48 rupees and 54 cents to 1,293 rupees and 20 cents, while BOP 1 Select Best and Best maintained, while the balanced varieties fell. The medium grown average fell by 59 rupees to 1,085 rupees and 52 cents. The high grown weekly average rose 28 rupees and 68 cents to 1,209 rupees and 7 cents a kilogram. Udupu Sellavas fell by 50 rupees per kilogram. Uvas fell by 30 rupees per kilogram, while BOPF Best Western Select invoices fell sharply, while others fell by 70 rupees per kilogram. A total of 4.7 million kilos were sold by the public auction in the first auction of April. Now let's take a look at the corporate news segment for the evening.
Expo Lanka Holdings has appointed Bokuto Yamauchi as the Group CEO of Expo Lanka Holdings and President of EFL Global. The appointment came after Hanif Yusuf stepped down as Group CEO with effect from 31st March 2024. CLA Coaching and Colombo Leadership Academy hosted the Leadership Excellence Awards for the 7th consecutive year in collaboration with their strategic partners in Colombo. The awards are conferred under the CLA Hall of Fame for Leadership Excellence, Companies with Great Managers and Great Manager Awards. Additionally, CLA announced the celebration and the recognition of 5 great millennial managers under a special category. In a statement, David Pierce Automobiles stated that it has officially started accepting pre-bookings for the all-new BAIC X55-2 SUV in Sri Lanka. DPA will introduce 2 versions, BAIC X55-2 Honor with standard features and BAIC X55-2 Luxury with full options. The company stated that it has now obtained approval to import and distribute the model with local value addition under the standard operating procedure for the automobile manufacturing and assembling industry and automobile component manufacturing industry in Sri Lanka.
And that's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.